All right, guys, we are live. What is up, my brothers? Joined by my good friend Troy Francis tonight. How you doing, bud?
All good, mate. All good. How are you, sir?
Doing good. Appreciate you carving out the time for this one because it's a fixed show. I always do these at 8 o'clock Eastern, and
Yeah.
what is it about one a.m. Eastern, or sorry, 1 a.m. in the UK right now?
Yeah, 1 a.m. in the UK. So it's a little bit of a late night, but it's all good, man.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to have a chat with you. So we're episode number 83 of the Before the Trainwreck series, and decided to pull Troy on this one because I feel like I need to take a break from chopping up through the chapters in my book. It's been fun going through what I've done so far, and I will cover the rest of it as well in some other Before the Trainwreck broadcast. But Troy wanted to jump in here with a list of the biggest mistakes he sees guys making with women these days and how it leads to potential train wrecks in their lives. Speaking of train wrecks, you were asking before we went live, how the day was and all that. I got to tell you, I had a busy ass stressful day today, man. This morning, the fan on my video card broke. Like the bearings just got chewed up, so it wasn't working. And you can't really run the video card without the fan on it. So I had to scramble to get a new one put in today. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do the show. But finally got it done last minute. But here we are, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us tonight. Smash the like button. If you're somewhere else on the interwebs right now watching this, I always appreciate it if you can click this link, Facebook, Twitter, wherever, and just head on over to YouTube. It just helps with the algorithms. And again, smash the like button. So let's jump right into this, man. The first one on your list is oneitis. I'm familiar with this. I've lived it. I'm sure you've lived it as well. We didn't come out of the womb knowing everything perfectly as we do today. But what's the deal with your view on oneitis and why you think men have it and how to avoid it?
Well, I mean, it's one of the most damaging things I think that exists in this whole space, in this whole arena of dating and relationships. And I mean, like you said, Rich, I've certainly suffered from it myself on many occasions. And I think just in working in this space and doing dating for so long, and also hanging around with, frankly, other guys who are like dating coaches or people or even not dating coaches, but just guys who are players who've had a, prolific, abundant sex life. It seems to me is that, yes, guys want sex. We all want sex. We all want to get laid, right? But there's also this thing about female affection as well. And sometimes it seems like the players, even the guys who've been promiscuous and they've been through, they've had a lot of female lovers and all the rest of it, they can still get hooked on, that one special girl. They can still get hooked on that particular girl. And it tends to be more about like I say, the affection, that bonding, the oxytocin, rather than necessarily the sex. And once it kicks in, it's just an incredibly powerful and damaging thing. So people really need to look out for it.
Yeah, I was going to say, what did that look like for you when you had it? Because I know for me, it was like, it was crippling. Like I've talked to a lot of guys that have had an unhealthy attachment to women. I spend at least a few chapters in my book, The Unplugged Alpha, talking about what it's like and things you can do to try to avoid it. But what did it look like for you when you've had it? And what's the best way to respond to it when a guy recognizes that it's something that's driving his daily agenda?
Well, I mean, I've had it several times throughout my life. I mean, I don't have it so much now because I've learned all this stuff and I've kind of come out the other side of the ringer. But I mean, I used to have it. I think there's two different forms of it, really. On the one hand, there's the sort of like unrequited oneitis, where you're just madly in love with this girl. She's not giving you the time of day, and it's not going anywhere. And that's the kind of chody side of things, I guess. So I've had that. I had that when I was at school. I'd fancy this girl in the class, and she didn't like me back, and all of that shit. So I've definitely had that. And then you've got the oneitis where there is some reciprocation, or you're actually in a relationship with her, but you're more invested in her than she is in you. Right. And and potentially she pulls away and she ends up dumping you. I mean, I've had many examples of this, but probably one of the worst ones was I'd just broken up with a girlfriend who I'd been with for like a couple of years, and I was still kind of like quite cut up by that. And I met this other girl on a dating app actually, who was really, really attractive. I mean, I know we all in this space, people talk about 9s and 10s and all this kind of stuff, but I mean, she was up there. I'm not going to put a figure on it, but for me, she was up there in terms of her physical attractiveness. She was also a very intelligent woman. She was doing a PhD. So she kind of had that side of things as well. And I just fell for a hook, line, and sinker. Now, as it was, this girl actually had a boyfriend at the same time. It was kind of complicated because we'd met before years ago, and then we sort of met up again. She at this point had a boyfriend. I think she was kind of getting fed up with him because it was getting a bit boring. They'd been together a few years. So she starts like seeing me in the background. And we're meeting up, we're going to hotels, we're having crazy sex, we're having like sex like 10 times in a day and all this kind of crazy stuff. And I was just completely hooked on this girl. But the fact that she was with this other guy and she wouldn't leave the guy because although she was fed up with him, she was still in the relationship with him. He was fulfilling that provider role. That really screwed me up. And it screwed me up for quite a long period of time because there was this intense sexual attraction. And yet she would then at the end of it say, all right, thanks, see you later. And then go back to her boyfriend. And of course, as most people can imagine, that's really tough to deal with. And I had to just like pull myself out of that really forcibly but it was taking me down a very, very dark road.
Well, at least you had oneitis for a dime. I had a bad case of oneitis for a single mommy.
Well, but that's the thing, right? Isn't it? Because it's like it's not necessarily how hot the woman is necessarily, or like her attributes. Even it's just has she got that certain thing that makes you like sort of attached to her?
Yeah, and I'm saying that not to like flick boogers at myself, but just to drive home the point that it can happen to pretty much any guy at any type in his life, any time in his life, for any type of girl.
Yeah.
It's happened a few times, in my life, and it really is crippling. It's a big distraction to a guy that should be on his purpose, that should be making himself his own mental point of origin, and of course chasing excellence, not women. And for some guys, they end up with what would look like symptoms like PTSD, right? Like they have a hard time dealing with recurring negative thoughts going back to certain places, or they might have a hard time sleeping or staying asleep, or they might wake up in the middle of the night with their unconscious mind trying to reconcile what happened, which is a big ass distraction to guys' lives. So how does a guy, well, let's talk about two things. How do you avoid oneitis, and how do you deal with it if you get it?
So I think the first one, avoiding it, really, it comes down to the old abundance, which everyone talks about and pays lip service to. But, you really need to live it. You really need to have abundance in terms of other females in your life, or at least the ability to bring other females into your life in such a way that you're not worried about it. You're not sitting there thinking, I'm at the cliff edge now, and if I don't just hang on to this one woman, then that's it. I'm screwed for life, or not screwed for life, as the case may be. You've got to know that you've got that ability to go out and create new bonds, create new relationships with women, and bring them into your life as a replacement. Having said that even that doesn't entirely eradicate it, because like I say, I've been friends with some guys who have very high notch counts, who've been very promiscuous in their lives. They don't have a problem with getting women, but they still get stuck on that particular girl. They still get stuck on that particular woman. And it's hard to predict, isn't it? Because I'm sure you've had this as well. I mean, I've met girls and, you go together a few times and then you get bored and it just fizzles out. And then there's other girls, just for some reason, there's that chemical thing. It's like the two of you are drawn together, and that's where you're in the danger zone. So once you're in it, I think like with any sort of addiction, the first step is to recognize that you're in it and you've got a problem. Recognize that you're in a situation that is doing you harm effectively. And then you've got to go cold turkey on it. You've got to cut the ties, and you've really got to cold turkey it. And you've just got to do that for a period of time. And you've just got to say to yourself, no matter whatever else I do today, I'm not going to contact her. I'm not going to stalk her on social media or anything like that. I'm going to get on with my life. And it's really, really tough at first. But if you keep going, you will start to pull through it.
What do you think of the notion of the best way to like the soundbite is something along the lines of the best way to get over one woman is to get under another?
Well, I think it works to a point, but I mean, have you ever had that experience where you've just split up with somebody, or you've just, whatever, the relationship's died, and then you go out and you have sex with somebody else? And yes, in a way, obviously we all want to have sex. Sex is great, right? But there's still sometimes, if you're really hung up on another woman, it can sort of almost make the pain worse in the short term, because it's sort of like you're doing this thing, but then you're thinking, oh, but it kind of should have been with her. So I'm a little bit skeptical about that one in a sense. But then on the other hand, you know, to be honest, if you get yourself out there and you go and meet a bunch of other girls, then in the end, it's going to ease it off, right?
Yeah. Comment here from channel member Tuscan Razorback says, oneitis can be a miserable state of being, but Troy's correct. It's abundance versus scarcity. It's very hard to have oneitis, because I mean, it's right in the word, right? Like oneitis.
Yeah.
If you have an abundance of women, like if you're spoiled for choice, if you're spinning plates, if you're non-monogamous, it's you know, it's an option to consider if you have a predisposition, or if you're prone to it. I think there's two parts of the mind that you have to deal with. There's a conscious mind that can recognize, okay, this is an unhealthy attachment. This is stupid. There is no one. She wasn't a unicorn. You know, there's at least 4 billion other women on the planet that could be potentially, you know, more interesting than the one that just left me, sort of thing. And then there's a subconscious mind that might hold on to some broken belief system that is not serving you, that conflicts with the conscious mind, recognizing, you know, the red pill truths of it all, that you might need some hypnosis or something like that to try to un-F your mind with.
Well, yeah, and hypnosis, I think, is a good thing to try, definitely in this situation if you're struggling with this. I mean, like, I've done some work.
I've done it too. I've done a couple sessions with actually Ryan Christensen.
Yeah, I've done some work with the other Ryan, actually, and I've also had conversations with Ryan Christensen. And I mean, I think that stuff is really powerful, because sometimes there is an underlying psychological aspect to this, you know. And I think for someone like me, you know, my parents divorced when I was young, and I also had no contact with my mother for quite a long period of time. There was about a 13-year period where I had no contact with my biological mother. And, you know, we're in contact now. We have a great relationship and all the rest of it. But I think things like that, they do harm you, or they do have an effect. And sometimes stuff like that, you kind of need to work on in some way, you know? So it's not always as simple as just saying, oh, well, I'll just go out and meet a load of other girls, because like that can put a plaster on it, but it doesn't necessarily get to that underlying, you know, whatever it is, that damage that might be laying underneath.
Cool. All right, so let's move on to the next one, so we can try to stay on time. We got manipulative and gold digging women. Why are they a big mistake for men? Like, why is that such a big threat?
Well, if you are somebody who is inexperienced, and maybe you haven't had a lot of, you haven't had a lot of sexual partners, you haven't had a lot of girlfriends, you haven't had a lot of relationships, then you are particularly prone to this kind of thing. And it's, you know, the thing about gold diggers can get overstated at times. I've seen people on Twitter saying things like, you know, you're so worried about gold diggers and you're earning 40,000 a year. You know, what the F sort of thing. And I can see that point of view. I think it gets a bit overstated. Guys can be like, oh my God, is she a gold digger? And I think actual gold diggers who are only after money, I think it's a very, very small minority of women who are really just so cynical, and it's just like, I'm just in this for the cash. But you can certainly get women who are manipulative in terms of wanting to just shape things to their own agenda. And this happened to me with a relationship a couple of years ago. I was with this girl, and it was pretty clear that, you know, she wanted to get married. She wanted to have a family. She wanted to, you know, do the whole thing. And, you know, I was being primed for that position. And I was just the right guy in that place at the right time, or so she thought. I then blew the relationship up and got out of it. But she was, you know, and it's not that she was like an evil person or that she was sitting there with this big master plan, but she clearly wanted certain things. And, you know, I was a homeowner. I had a property. I think she quite liked that. I think that ticked one of her boxes, because she was like, oh, this guy's got some equity in London, and he's got this other place abroad. And, you know, there were certain things I was ticking some boxes, and I think she wanted things to go a certain way. And looking back on it now, I could see that her behavior was very manipulative towards me. And fortunately for me, I was able to sort of break out of that relationship. It wasn't the easiest thing in the world, but I was able to get out of it because I knew that I had abundance. I knew that I wouldn't just be, you know, just sitting on my own 3 years later, crying about it, sort of thing.
Well, we know women, generally speaking, are solipsistic, right? So they
Yeah.
have a difficult time seeing past their own noses, and they tend to make decisions and choices that are more closely aligned with their own best interests. You know, like they're kind of born with mental point of origin hardwired into their
Yeah.
firmware. But what sort of manipulation would you suggest guys need to keep their eyes open for?
Well, I think anything that is potentially going to take you off your purpose, really. You know, it's kind of like, because with this particular girl, it was like I had certain things that I wanted to do. You know, I was working in a corporate job at the time, but I also wanted to do writing. I wanted to build my business on the side. You know, I had various different things that I was working on, and I was pretty busy. I mean, I've always been a pretty busy sort of guy. You know, I've always been quite driven and had various different things going on at a time. And obviously a relationship can conflict with that because they want to take up a load of your time. But with this girl, it was very clear that she just had different plans. Her plan wasn't any of the stuff that I wanted to do. Her plan was, right, let's live together, let's get engaged, let's have a kid, and probably move to somewhere in the suburbs and just do all of that. And so all of my stuff was just getting bulldozed out the way. And it was very clear from very early on. So I think it's very subtle, isn't it? But for me, the way I experienced it, and by the way, this was only really the second time I'd ever lived with a woman. And I only allowed it to continue for 6 months because it was such a nightmare. But it was very, it's the death by a thousand cuts thing, isn't it? Yeah. You know, like she'll say, oh, don't go out on Friday and see your friends because I want to see you on Friday. And then it's just one little thing after another. And it's not like you can immediately point to her and go, you're being manipulative. And she's sitting there like, you know, cackling. But it's just like when you look at it en masse, you can see that there's just this build-up of different things. She's just pushing your behavior. So I think it's anything that's threatening to take you off the path that you had in mind for yourself is potentially manipulative, and you've got to look out for it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that manipulation is something that kind of creeps up on you. I've been in a couple of relationships where you start hearing nonsense like, well, Rich, we don't do things that way, or Rich, that's not how it's done. It's got to be done like this. Yeah. And you'll run into that with women from time to time. Some are worse than others. Others are very, agreeable and in your frame. But I think that if you find yourself in a scenario where, you feel like you're constantly, taking out a stamp and stamping everything. Yes, 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 yes. Yeah. Whatever you say, honey. Yes. Just stamping all that shit all day long. Giving up your hopes, dreams, ambitions, and desires to placate towards all of hers all the time. You're definitely in something that's a manipulative relationship. As far as gold digging, well, women are hypergamous, which kind of implies that all women by nature would like to be with somebody higher up on the socioeconomic scale. Yeah. So I think you're going to have a hard time not seeing that or some degree of that. But there are a lot of women that are really looking for financial resources, acquisition of assets from guys. They say that men are hunters and women are gatherers. We go out and hunt and acquire resources and monetary sort of rewards, maybe assets like homes, lake houses, boats, cars, stuff like that. And women will tend to gather, bits and pieces of that from, the men that end up sometimes in their lives. So you do have to be aware of that. I mean, you do have to, draw a bit of a protective perimeter boundary around you and your assets, and be very, very careful about who you let in on the inside. Because if you're going to get involved with a woman that really just treats you like an ATM, and just sort of milks you for advancing her own further agenda, you can really create a train wreck for yourself. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you say, there's different degrees of it, isn't there? Because you've got the sort of stereotypical, almost like Ukrainian or Russian girl who's just like, oh, buy me a handbag sort of thing. And there's that. Yeah. There's that, which
YouTube channel is actually dedicated to that. I can't remember what it's called, but it's some chick that like sells it under the guise of how to date high value men. Yeah, it's basically a gold digger. I mean, there's no way around. Yeah,
I've seen that channel actually, because when I went on to Beauty Meets Beast, you know that, I don't know if you've seen that. A couple of the guys have been onto it, but they get a girl to interview a guy in this space. I went onto that, and they got me to prep for it. They got me to watch that channel, and it is very sort of like, right, and this is how you get him to buy you a I don't know, Chanel.
And if he doesn't buy you a handbag, then you have to shame him like this, right?
Yeah.
Entire strategy about, I'm not flying in coach, but you've got to fly in first class, and if you don't fly me in first class, and you're not a man, sort of thing, right? So it follows through with either shaming tactics or some pointing and sputtering. So you got to be good at identifying it. I mean, you can fly a woman either way you want, even if you have the financial resources to put her in first class. At the end of the day, it's up to you. You know what it is that you want to tolerate with gold digging and manipulative type of behavior. Let's grab the super chat here real quick. So, well, there's two of them here. ZDM314 says, just wondering, after last LTR, how did you deal with the grief and loneliness of the breakup? Fresh out of a 14-year relationship, and it's bad. So he's talking about grief and loneliness.
Well, it's tough, isn't it? And 14 years is a very long time. So, I mean, there is no easy answer to this, I don't think, other than you've just got to, for a start, you've got to make that rock solid commitment to yourself at the beginning. She is now effectively dead to me, you know? There is no going back. I'm going to delete all of her contact details. I'm going to delete her social media. I'm not going to look at her social media. I'm not going to talk. Obviously, I'm not going to talk to her, but I'm not going to talk to any of her friends. I'm not going to talk to anybody who knows her. I'm just going to make a complete break, because you need to have that complete break from her. You know, if you relapse on it at all, if you take a peek at her Instagram or something, it's just going to bring it all flooding back, right? You've got to have that cold turkey, and then you've just got to have a very structured, ordered life. You've got to be like, right, okay, so tomorrow I'm getting up at 6 a.m. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to work for 3 hours. I'm going to do X, Y, Z, whatever it is, and you've just got to push through it. And I don't think that unfortunately there's an easy way through this, but you've just got to. You know the old saying, if you're going through hell, keep going. Do you know what I mean? It's like you've just got to keep that forward momentum. I don't know. Have you got any other suggestions on that, Rich?
I got a couple. So dealing with the loneliness part, a lot of guys abandon their hobbies, dreams, passions, and friendships when they get into a relationship. I see this time and time again. And part of it is because men allow it, and part of it is because women try to separate guys from their hobbies and their friendships and extracurriculars, because they don't want you doing your stuff. They want you doing stuff, but it has to be on their agenda a lot of the time. So a lot of guys fall prey to that, and they end up in a lonely scenario where they get out of the relationship and they're like, she's gone now, and so are my friends, and I used to do these things, and those guys are not around anymore, so now I'm lonely. So one of the things you got to understand is, don't ever let that happen. You know, if you like doing things, if you like going dirt biking, camping, boating, hunting, shooting guns, make sure that you maintain your passions and your hobbies. Don't let a woman take you away from things that you enjoy doing. It's incredibly important to remember that. Now, the other thing that I want to add to this is the notion of warp rides too, because I don't think a lot of guys understand that women move very, very quickly, and why they've adapted to move very quickly from relationship to relationship without any kind of remorse or grief on their end. A lot of guys are very surprised. I know I was one time. Like, I remember I had a great night with this ex LTR, and thought everything was fine. Got an argument, the next day about some BS. She stormed off, went out with her girlfriend in a nightclub, and banged some other guy. Right. So it's like, it boggles the mind. Hang on, the other day you're like, oh, I love you so much, and all that. And then, like, a couple of days later, you're out porking some other guy that you picked up, and you spend the night with him. So it boggles the mind for guys. Like, how is it that women can do this when men struggle to even deal with the, the grief and the loneliness? And the thing you have to understand is, for tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of years, arguably, I mean, if you go back in human lineage, our DNA has been around basically for 26 million years. We've been operating as humans for a reasonably long period of time. I can't remember what it is. I think it's like between 6 and 7. But we've been operating as modern sapiens for quite a while. And, you'd have warring tribes. You'd have small nomadic hunter-gatherer tribes that lived in groups of maybe 25 to 50 or so. And if there was a warring tribe that came in and conquered, what they would do automatically is they'd kill off all the men that were of fighting age. If they couldn't put them in slavery, then they would kill them off. So all the men and boys would be killed off, and the women would be kept for childbearing. So women by their nature, so that they could survive and move forward, and their children could survive and move forward, they would often become war brides. And it's very, very easy for women to adapt to their captors. Even as recently as World War II, there was a story that I was talking to Rollo about at one point, where these Dutch women accommodated the Nazi captors in Holland. And after the war, they were all noted. Like, the locals knew who they were that were collaborating with the Nazis. They were sleeping with them. They were helping them out and all that sort of thing. After the war, when the Germans lost, and of course, they're still there, they put them to shame. They took them in the public square. They would shave their head. They would embarrass them.
Mm-hmm.
They would do everything they could to make sure that they try to deal with the repercussions, but they don't think about it and they don't care about it. It's very easy for women to move on. So when you get that through your head, that at least deals with the conscious part of your mind. So, just find yourself back into the hobbies, my friend, is what I would say that you should do. We got another super chat here before we go on to the next point. But Prison Mike, that's a great photo. Who is that? Oh, that's the guy from Office. What's it called? Not Office Space. The Office.
Yeah.
Anyway, how would you deal with a inconsistent woman, one who shows high interest and caring one day, but is short-tempered or distant others, yet she still talks about long-term circumstances? I don't
know. Isn't that all women?
Well, I'll let you go first on that one, Troy. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, there's always going to be ups and downs in mood and stuff. I mean, I find that with with the women that I've dated. I think if it's really marked and it's really it's a problem, then you could be dealing with somebody who's got some kind of like mental type issues. And I think that in the short term, you want to do some soft nexting. So you want to don't reward bad behavior, basically. If she is funny with you and it's bothering you, then just walk away. Get out of the, if you don't live together, then just say, listen, I'm going to go home because I'm not feeling that there's a good atmosphere between us today, and just get out, and then maybe don't call for a day or so. Obviously, if you guys are living together, it's a bit more of a problem. Maybe just get out of the house for a little bit. Just say, listen, I'm going out. And just don't tolerate the bad behavior, and certainly don't reward the bad behavior. And in doing that, you're kind of setting out your boundaries about what you will and you won't accept.
Yeah, I'm just digging up a video because I put it out in the last couple of weeks. So soft nexting, boom. It's there in the chat. Just open it up, watch it later. But essentially, when a woman invites drama into your life, you can use soft nexting as a useful tool. You can't use it if you live with her or if you're married, but watch that video for a little more detail. And Troy's right. I mean, you might be dealing with somebody that's got a personality disorder. I've said hire slowly and fire quickly. You take time to vet people in business, in business partnerships, in relationships. And if you identify that you're with somebody that has a personality disorder, Joe Navarro, I don't have the book here, but Joe Navarro has a book called Dangerous Personalities. You should read it. And what he does is he runs you through this gauntlet of basically tests and identifying sound bites, and it will help you to identify people, more specifically men and women, of course, that might have a personality disorder that could be problematic for you in a relationship. That could be one of the problems. Women are up and down, like Troy said, well, isn't that all women? But of course, we're joking here a little bit. But if you've got a woman that's warm, loving, and caring, and then at the flip of a switch can be like cold as ice and frigid, you've got a problem there. It's more than likely going to be some kind of personality disorder. But either way, the medium's a message. Her behavior is telling you what she's all about and how she feels about you in the relationship. So don't ignore it. Don't listen to words that she says. Watch the behavior. That's the most important part. Let me pull this out of the screen here. All right, let's do drama queens and energy vampires. We kind of talked a little bit about drama queens in that last one, didn't we?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the energy vampire bit comes about because it's just so exhausting to deal with somebody like that, and it's kind of what you were just describing, this up and downness, that sort of 1 minute she's like this, then the next minute she's like that. It's really exhausting. And it's actually a form of passive aggressiveness, actually. I mean, I've actually read books or articles, not as part of this space, but by more sort of mainstream kind of, relationship advisors. And they would actually deem it to be abusive if somebody treats you in that manner. If you've got somebody who, say, giving the silent treatment, for example, I mean, this is a really classic thing, isn't it? She's obviously upset about something. You've done something, and you say to her, "So what's wrong?" And she just won't tell you. And you're like, "No, come on, what's wrong? Why are you being like this?"
Troy, I'm
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
I'm fine.
And she's like that. She says, "I'm fine," and then she just won't talk to you. And it goes on for hours and hours and hours. I mean, on the one hand, you could just say, "Well, that's just how she is or whatever," but actually, really, it's a form of passive aggressive behavior, and it's actually quite, with an emphasis perhaps on the aggressiveness, actually, because it makes the other person feel really bad, and arguably, it's kind of abusive. So really, you don't want to be putting up with that on a long-term basis. I mean, if it happens time and again, then if it happens occasionally, fine, whatever. But like, if that's happening on a consistent basis, then most importantly, it's sapping your energy and it's sapping your mental space that could better be devoted to something else, because a lot of this stuff is crap. A lot of this stuff is like, oh, well, you didn't do the washing up 3 weeks ago. And then, I had to go and buy the milk, and it's all nonsense. Mm-hmm. It's all just rubbish, and this is one of the problems I found with relationships in my life, that you get dragged into this domestic minutiae, which when oh, we didn't go to see my parents last weekend, and now we're going to see your parents, and it's all nonsense that's got nothing to do with your key purpose in life, whatever that might be, and I just keep coming back to the same thing. It's like, well, I'm only here for a few more decades. I'm going to be dead quite soon. There are certain things I want to accomplish in my life. Is arguing about this stuff going to get me nearer to those things or further away? And inevitably the answer is it's going to get me further away.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good way of framing it, because I actually cover drama queens. I more or less coined them hissy fits, because that's really what they are. They women will throw hissy fits when they don't know how to process stress or moments in the relationship that they can't control or they can't adapt to. And hissy fits come in all kinds of different forms. Like you said, it could be passive aggressive stuff. It could be something as extreme as, we'll just leave all my shit on the front porch and I'm going to come pick it up and F you, sort of thing. Right. Yeah. And, they want to try to put their foot down to show that they've got some frame or something going on. And really the best way to deal with it is just to soft next it. You get drama that shows up in your life, you soft next it, you just withdraw your attention, because we know that attention is the coin of the realm when it comes to women. And when you remove the attention, you set a firm boundary, essentially saying, look, if you want to behave this way, fine. I'm not going to give you any of my attention. She's going to call you. She's going to text you. She might even try to show up. You just ignore it all. And it's as simple as that. Energy vampires, you're going to know when you're around an energy vampire, because when you spend time with them, and this also goes for guys as well too, employees, business partners. I mean, you'll start to notice this throughout life. When you spend time with somebody, it could be a few hours, it could be an afternoon, for example, but when you spend time with them, you feel drained after it. You feel exhausted being around their personality and the sort of conversations that they want to have. You don't feel energized. Like, when I have a conversation with Troy, if we do a cast, we did a cast last week on his channel, and we talk about stuff and we kind of chop up ideas. I feel good after the conversation, right? I want to have another conversation with Troy and kind of dive down a different rabbit hole, or maybe, take a look at something else. So he's not an energy vampire. If anything, the guy charges my batteries, and I hope that he gets the same sort of energy from me back on the end of it. But you will know when you're around energy vampires, because you're just going to feel exhausted by the end of that day.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're feeling that, then you need to get out of it. But again, you see, this is one of the things that abundance is so important, right? Because if you're a guy that doesn't have much abundance, if you're a guy who doesn't feel that his options are that extensive, then it's more likely that earlier on in your life, you're going to get locked down with a woman who's like this, and you're probably going to end up like moving in with her, or, whatever, or even, God forbid, getting married to her. And then you're screwed, or at least you're in a much more difficult position than you would be if you kept your options open, at least for a period of time.
Let's go on to the next one. We've got transactional sex. So what is transactional sex, and why is it a big mistake that men make with women?
Well, this is kind of going back a bit to the gold digging side of things, but I suppose transactional sex is very much overtly, you do this for me, and then maybe we'll have sex, or maybe we won't. And there was a guy that we knew in London a few years ago who was actually kind of in his early 50s, and he got into the whole game thing. He got into sort of going and approaching women. He hadn't actually been married, but he'd had a very sort of successful professional life, but it just never clicked with women. And so he was doing training with a friend of mine, and he was going out meeting all these different kinds of girls, and he was very good socially. You know, he was very charismatic. He could create opportunities for himself, and he was, as I say, successful as well. So he had that kind of thing going for him. But he would just get into these situations with girls where they would be saying, oh, you know, can you just buy me an iPad? Can you buy me, my laptop's gone, I need it for my job, I've got this job interview coming up, can you just help me out here? And he would just time and time again get pulled into these very transactional situations where these girls were sort of twisting them around their little fingers and kind of getting him to help them out financially or in other ways with different things. He ended up taking on a girl to work with him in his office. He was paying for, as I say, goods and, you know, sometimes overnight stays and all this kind of thing. Really, really bad place to be, you know, because like nobody needs to be in that situation. You know, it's not that there's anything wrong if you're in a relationship with somebody with helping them out. But in those early stages when it's very, very clearly, can you do this for me? And then maybe I'll give you that. That's not the sort of sex you want to be having. Okay. You know, you want to be having sex that is, well, I think you talk about validational sex. You want to be having, you want to be having sex that is just authentic and just because she really likes you. You know, it's that hell yes thing, as opposed to this. Yeah,
like women will seek validational sex from like. There's no conditions. It's let's get it on right now. Like you know, own it. You know, sort of thing. Whereas you know the transactional components like chore play. There's always famous memes that we see throughout the year that we share on social media, and it's like a whiteboard or a chalkboard or something like that, and it's got something like wash the dishes, get a kiss, vacuum the floor and do the laundry, blowjob, you know, take the kids to the park for 6 hours so I can sit around and talk on the phone, sexy time. But transactional sex is not her best. It's going to be you know, well, another good example of transactional sex is paying for it. You know, it's basically paying for a prostitute, you know, as an example. You're not going to get enthusiastic, genuine, burning desire. It's not going to be like that at all. It's going to be like a transaction. Whereas validational is she shows up and she's wet and ready to go right here, right now, any place, anytime. You can be driving a car. You could be in the change room at the department store. That's validational, and it happens anywhere, everywhere, in a very comfortable and natural sort of way without any condition whatsoever.
And I suppose what happens with guys quite often is that the sex becomes transactional as the relationship goes on. Like at the beginning, it's validational, and she's just like, "Oh my God, you're so amazing." And then you get into that relationship, you get into that betarization kind of curve. Perhaps you're living together, and then over time it becomes a bit like, well, I don't really feel like it tonight, but why don't you do the shopping and then maybe tomorrow or whatever? And it goes down that route. So guys have to find a way to arrest that happening.
Yeah, the worst kind of transactional that I've seen is when I'm on a consult or on a call with a guy and he's with a single mom and he digs her vibe and he wants to be with her and he wants to make it work, but she's making him have transactional sex. Like he's running around doing errands for her and her kids, picking them up, dropping them off, taking them out, entertaining them. These are children that are not even his again. And he's raising another man's, you know, seed, of course. And he doesn't even get any of the intimacy that he expects that should come with that in the relationship. So when you start to identify yourself in a relationship where the sex starts to become more transactional, that's like the clock's ticking down to the end of it. If you're getting more transactional sex than validational sex, not a good thing. Let's go to the next one here because we got about 20 minutes left here. Let's talk about reducing the likelihood of cuckoldry and why that's important and how guys make that mistake.
Well, I mean, along with oneitis, I think cuckoldry is really the worst thing that can happen to you as a guy, really, in the whole dating, mating marketplace. I mean, just biologically, it's the worst thing that can happen to you, right? Because you are being forced to, you know, raise another guy's offspring effectively, or that's the end game of it anyway. But, you know, I suppose if we take a step back and count cheating as well, you know, she goes and bangs someone else. That's the worst thing really that can happen to you in the context of if it's meant to be a monogamous relationship. So, you know, and this is something that obviously can happen to anybody. It happens quite commonly. And guys need to be aware of it, and they need to protect themselves from it happening. But one of the key reasons why it will happen is if you're a simp and you are jumping through all of her hoops and you're not setting out strong boundaries. You know, you're not showing that you are that guy who is prepared to walk. You're not showing that, you know, you are somebody who has other options, and you're not going to tolerate that kind of behavior. You know, it's been said that the stereotypical alpha male is far less likely to get cheated on than somebody who's, you know, the beta dude who's just like, oh my God, you're so amazing. Because like you said, I mean, she's going to want to think that she's with the best that she can get. Okay. And if you display to her that you're not the best that she can get, then you are in greater danger of, you know, being cut. And that's kind of just how it goes. Right. So you've got to A, not get into that position in the first place. And B, you've got to, you know, do everything you can once you're in a relationship where you might be vulnerable to it, to show that you're not the kind of person who's going to tolerate that behavior.
Yeah, 100%. It's a big risk. Big risk. Excuse me. Hang on, I gotta take a drink here. I got see how cuckoldry chokes me up thinking about it. Damn.
Just even the thought of it. Sorry.
Just the thought of it, right?
But we see so many relationships, so many instances where this happens with guys, and it's just the worst possible thing. And it's always guys who get taken unawares as well, isn't it? It's guys who are like, oh my God, she could never do that. I mean, I remember this dude years ago I was friends with in Manchester, and I went round to his place a few times. He wasn't actually married, but I think he was engaged, and they were living together and whatever. And, you know, I remember having a few nights out with them and stuff like that, and then chilling at their apartment or whatever. And I remember him saying to me, like, oh, she's friends with this dude now. He's a photographer. He's quite successful, but, you know, I've just got to trust him because that's just how our relationship is. We've got this trust together. And I remember even then thinking, well, that sounds a little bit weird, whatever. And then, you know, lo and behold, a couple of months later, it turns out she's been banging this dude. And it's like, it's those guys who are just, they've closed off all of their options. They don't think it could ever happen to them. And they're just kind of needy chodes who just give the impression that they're just going to tolerate it. And you've just got to not be that person, right?
I tweeted this out today because I came across this comment. Nobody bangs more girlfriends and wives than just a friend. So yeah, this is just a part of the discussion thread that I was reading. But basically he said, you know, I confronted her about him, but she insists he's just a friend, even though I've seen the conversations about them dating and them having sex and everything of the sort. I'm telling you guys,
yeah,
nobody bangs more girlfriends and wives than just a friend.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about cuckoldry, because when I was doing some of the research for my book, in one of the sections I was talking about cuckoldry and the instances of it, and it's actually quite difficult to accurately estimate how often men are the victims of cuckoldry. And again, cuckoldry basically means you're raising somebody else's seed, either knowingly or unknowingly. Knowingly, men do it when they date single moms. Okay, so that's a knowingly part. So that's a choice. If you want to make it, fine. Okay, I've made the mistake myself. I'll raise my hand. I get it. But the unknowing part is if she goes and bangs somebody else and then tells you that you're the father, but you're not. And because cuckoldry relies on deception, you're not going to get honest answers from women when you survey them. But the best data that I could find when I was digging for it is somewhere between 10 and 30% of all children born in a relationship, whether you're talking LTR, marriage, whatever, but all children born to a couple, the guy's cucked. You can get more of those details in the book, and I'm just going to quickly plug it since I'm talking about it. But Unplugged Alpha is out on Amazon. You can get it in print and in Kindle, pretty much in most of the main markets in the world. So check it out. It's a great read. Let me go here to the red flag stuff because I wanted to talk about this as well.
Yeah, because it happens, unfortunately, like you said, between 10% and 30%. I mean, it happens a lot more than we would like to think, you know. And it's you know, it's one of those dirty secrets of, you know, human sexuality, isn't it? And of course, it happens because, you know, she wants those Chad genes.
Need, man.
exactly. So the first thing is awareness. You've got to be aware of it.
Yeah, you definitely have to be aware of it. And, go and just read that chapter that I covered it all in. So let's talk about the red flag detection guide, because I know you've got a course out on charisma and dating. And you guys know me, I often talk about red flags. If you're on my email list, you've probably got those 20 red flags right now. Let me just quickly throw the banner up. It's actually pinned in the top comment, but where's my banners here? Where are you, banners? Red flags. Boom. I don't have it up. I gotta add it. But pinned in the top comment, there's a link to my email list. It's just entrepreneursandcars.com/red flags. And you can get access to the 20 that I throw in there. But talk about the red flag detection guide that you have in this course that you're running.
So in Charisma and Dating Academy, I do talk about red flags. And I mean, for me, some of the key things really are some of the things that we talked about earlier, which are, is she a complement to your life, or is she going to get in the way of your life, of your greater purpose? And of course, it depends on the nature of the relationship you want to have with her. I mean, if it's a one-night stand, then I think a lot of the red flags that guys talk about, on the internet in this space are maybe less important, because if you're only going to see her once or twice or whatever, then whatever. If she's got the odd tattoo or something, then fine. But in terms of anything longer term, if you're getting more intertwined with her, ultimately you've got to be thinking, listen, is she going to help me get there or not? Is she going to hinder me? And in most cases, unfortunately, she's going to hinder you. Really, I mean, that's the reality. I mean, they always talk about, behind every great man is a great woman and all that stuff. I mean, I'm not sure that that's true. I find that very hard to believe, because
I don't know that the woman's necessarily great, but what I do know is that women don't stand behind loser men. They only stand behind great men.
Right. Yeah. So it's sort of like it's sort of like it's a hindsight thing rather than a causal thing. But yeah, so I mean, like, I'm always just trying to weed out, is she trying to manipulate me? Is she trying to sabotage? Is she trying to stop me from doing the things that I actually want to do to have a good life, whatever that means for me, and so those are the key things that I will be looking out for. And you can tell that early on by the way that she reacts, the way that she is on a date, how demanding she is, how sort of happy to go along with what you would like to do she is, how argumentative she is. I mean, all of these different subtle things you've got to look out for to try to prevent getting into a situation further down the line where, you're just being browbeaten by this woman who just wants to basically pursue her own agenda.
Yeah, we got a super chat here that's kind of relevant to this. He says, is it even possible to have a monogamous LTR with a very attractive woman? I've always said it's always better to be with a pleasant 7 than a cunty 10.
I mean, I don't know. I think I don't want to be too cynical about this. I don't think everyone is different to a degree, right? I mean, there are very attractive women who are really faithful, who are really, they are within a certain parameter of time, they are very nurturing and caring and all of that stuff, Conversely, there are also very unattractive women who are complete a-holes, and it's not necessarily just correlated in terms of physical attractiveness. But what I would say is that time is an issue here as well, right? Because it's all very well to talk about monogamy in an LTR, but how long are we talking? I mean, if we're talking 3 years, great. Like a lot of people can do a 3-year LTR and be monogamous and happy days. When you're getting to 5 years, when you're getting to 10 years, 15 years, all of a sudden, on both sides, it doesn't look quite as shiny as it did back in the day. And, and at that point, particularly if you put a ring on it, you've kind of got to cross your fingers and hope that, she's going to sort of play by the rules that were set out at the beginning. And in many cases, that doesn't happen. So I think time is an issue here as well as attractiveness.
Yeah, I think to the point that, I mean, humans aren't very good at monogamy, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
Again, referring back to my book, I have an entire chapter on that, talking about all the details why, making references to Evo Psych and a lot of other experiences. But I think that women can be monogamous so long as they view you as your best possible option. and they don't have any other options. So let me give you an example. I knew this couple once where they were both just miserable. They were just awful people. She was miserable. She was just like this disgusting too, and he was this depressed, miserable guy that would lock himself in his room. They were both very unattractive. They didn't like each other, but yet they stayed monogamous because neither one of them had the option to leave. They didn't have financial resources. They were cowards. They weren't good looking enough to find somebody else. So they just stuck it out, for each other. And I suppose the kids. So there's that to consider. But if she's an attractive woman and she wakes up every day saying, this guy is my best option, I can't do any better, I'm very pleased with my life, she'll more than likely be monogamous to you on a long-term basis, as long as she continues to feel that on a daily, weekly, yearly sort of basis. So just consider that and take it for what it's worth. But again, I maintain humans aren't very good at monogamy. In fact, we kind of suck at it if you look at all the data. But if you choose to be monogamous, yes, you can be monogamous on a longer term basis. For women, it really just boils down to, is this guy my best option?
Yeah. Yeah. And the difficulty you've got with an LTR is you've got to keep measuring up on a consistent basis over the long term. And that, I guess that's why people will say, actually, I think you've said, marriage is playing on hard mode.
Long-term relationship or marriage is much harder than just dating or spinning plates.
Yeah, you say in the book, don't you? It's sort of like it's all very well spinning plates. It's all very well if you only see her once a week or a couple of times a month or something. It's fun. You can keep the excitement up. You can keep that going for a long period of time. And I've done that. I've kept things going for long periods of time when we're effectively friends with benefits, because we don't see each other that much and there's not that domesticity. When you're in a LTR, and particularly if you're living together, gets a lot more difficult, because everybody becomes less exciting when there's proximity and when they're around you a lot. Do you know what I mean? It's like I was with my girl over lockdown, and it's a bit like, you can try and have this sort of sheen, you can try and have that mystique, but when you're with somebody 24/7 and the dirty washings on the floor and all that kind of stuff, it's very hard to remain that kind of exciting guy that she thought you were when she met you in the club or at the pool party or whatever it was back in, when you guys first met. And that's just for the case for anybody.
Absolutely. So we got another super chat here from Old Hand. He said, dumped by LTR. Year later, she's literally 3 doors down with the neighbor. Savage, a brutal but inspiring nadir. Never look back. Steve Pre. I don't know who Steve Pre is. You know who that guy is?
No, I don't. But it's a good word of advice there, I think.
Yeah. All right. So let's pull that out. We're coming up on the hour. We actually got to wrap it up because I have a private broadcast with my community after this. So a couple of closing notes. Troy right now is working on a course he's got out called Charisma and Dating Academy. So if you've enjoyed the broadcast, I'd strongly encourage you to check it out. He has a lot of very useful information. Let me grab the link here. It's pinned in the top comment if you're interested. It's for sale. How much is it, Troy?
It's $597 until Sunday. So if guys want to enroll, you've got until basically Sunday to do so through Rich's link. It's basically everything I've learned about dating and charisma over the last 15 years or so. Yeah. You've got the curriculum there.
Curriculum here. So you've got Dating Dynamics, a global scene, covering dating going global, opportunities becoming a new James Bond, what do you really want, red flag detection guide, how to have rock solid frame. You've got a module on charisma. These are all quite long too. You got 18, 12 minute videos, 22 minutes, dealing with fear of rejection, eradicating anger, crush anxiety, embarrassment. Okay. Dark side, how to be the bad boy. Chicks dig bad boys, we know that. Massive power on radical differentiation. What do you mean by the massive power of radical differentiation?
Standing out, being different to just being a boring normie, basically. So we do talk about fashion in this module, but it's also a bit like, who the hell are you actually, really, when it comes down to it, and how do you project that to the world?
Got it. Yeah. So expanding on the have a look in some depth. Attraction, dating techniques, pulling it all together. Guys, it's in depth. And you also have Zoom meetings as well, too, don't you?
Yeah, we've got a week's worth of 10 Zoom classes. So there's going to be 2 per day, 14th of December. week commencing. So we're going to have one in the morning, one in the evening EST. And yeah, we just go into massive detail about all of the stuff in the course. I've also, when you join the course, you also get 12 actual in-field recordings as well. So that's me actually interacting with real life women. So you get, going and talking to them on the street, getting phone numbers, going on instant dates, all that kind of stuff. So you get to see this stuff in practice as well. It's not just me talking about it. And then in those Zoom webinars, what we'll be doing is actually going and breaking down those interactions and saying, look, this is what I said. This is what she said. This is what that means. This is what I could have done there. This is what I did well there. These are the things that you can do. So you can basically just take all of that material and just go out and use it yourself when you're interacting with women.
Yeah, 100%. And if you follow Troy on Twitter, he's got his bundle of books, basically everything he's written in a nice bundle for like less than $40. I think it is.
Yeah.
$35.
Yeah, $39 is Renegade Dating Blueprints. So if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see the links to that.
Awesome. And when does the course close? So when do people have to buy it by?
You've got until Sunday, basically. So next week.
Cool. And before we run, let me just quickly go full screen here and shout out to channel sponsor Tactical Soap. Grondike Soap Company has been a great supporter of my work. You guys are showering anyway, so if you want some pheromone infused tasty goodness, I shouldn't say tasty goodness because you don't eat it, but anyway, it's a nice natural product that's pheromone infused. Pinned in the top comment, you can grab it, or you can go to coopersoap.com, throw it up on the screen, boom, right here. And again, it's also pinned in the top comment. And if you've enjoyed the cast, I did a video last week on Troy's channel, basically reviewing my book. We had a great conversation on that, so I'm grateful that we talked about that. Again, it's on Amazon, pinned in the top comment. Bro, always a pleasure to have you on, man.
Awesome stuff, man. Thanks ever so much for that. It was great.
Yeah,
really enjoyed chatting to you
soon. I know that you got some infield strategies and a bunch of video, from over the years about how to kind of approach and talk to women.
Yeah,
if that's of interest to you guys, leave a comment below. We'll schedule another one again in the future if there's a big enough appetite for it. But I'll be back next Monday for the next Before the Train Wreck, kind of diving through some other chapters that I haven't covered in the book in some more depth, and probably take another series of Q&As, if not the next show, probably the one after, because that one seemed to be very well received. So
awesome. It's watching, great. It's a great book, by the way. I should say that as well. Thanks,
Troy. Appreciate it. It means a lot coming from an actual author, because there's some people out there that write pamphlets that
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, guys. We'll see you all in the next one.